Today we'd be discussing somewhat of a sensitive issue that recently occurred, and which is associated with the burning of Quran in front of a mosque in Sweden. And it was done by a person of Iraqi descent who's a Christian. So I just kind of want to get your perspective on, and this is not an isolated incident, something that has been happening pretty frequently in the past in Sweden. So I just kind of wanted to get your perspective on what's the instigation, what's the thought process or motivation behind such an act?
Thank you. That's it. It's very serious questions, and it's very sensitive, of course, and it's very much about the time we live in, I think. And you're absolutely right. This Quran burning that happened during Eid al-Adha a couple of days back was not unprecedented in recent Swedish history. Since the year 2020, we have seen more than 100 public Quran burnings in Sweden, most of which was instigated by another person, Rasmus Paludan, a Danish ethno-nationalist who wants to prohibit Islam and expel all Muslims from the Nordic countries as part of his vision to realize a world without Muslims. This, of course, provoked protests from the Muslim street and from many people concerned with human rights and anti-racism and all of these things. Some of these protests turned into violent clashes with the police, most notably during the so-called Easter riots last year. And to understand this, I think that it's necessary to situate the Quran burnings in the history of the West and in the contemporary political situation in Sweden. So looking at history first, for the past 500 years, we have burned books in the West as a way of eliminating the evil that these burned books are held to contain, which throughout history often has come to include the people that read and cherished these works. The first major Quran burning in history took place in Granada, 1499, after the fall of the last independent Muslim emirate, 1492. The Muslim population had been allowed to keep their mosques and traditions if they only swore allegiance to the crown. This changed when Jimenez de Cisneros, who was the confessor of Queen Isabel, was appointed Grand Inquisitor to Granada and got horrified when he saw Muslims on land sanctified by conquest as Christian, in his opinion. And to intimidate the Muslim population and to speed up their disappearance, Cisneros collected Qurans from mosques and libraries and private homes and instigated the first major public Quran burning at the marketplace in Granada. Unsurprisingly, this led to protests that were repressed by the Catholic monarchy and led to the prohibition of Islam, the ban on Muslim culture, the hijab, language, holidays, clothing, and eventually to the great expulsion, as it is called, by all Moriscos, that is, Christians of Muslim background, from Spain in 1609. And in 2020, since then, this pattern has been repeated throughout history. And in 2020, this was what Rasmus Paludan, the Danish ethno-nationalist extremist, tried to get going in Sweden by public burning of the Quran, provoking protests that should be stamped out by repression by the police. The answer to riot, normally by the state, is always repression. And so eventually he wanted to build up a situation that would expel Muslim people. So it was a clear case of incitement of hatred. And in Sweden, of course, the constitution protects freedom of expression, and freedom of expression to us is one of the cornerstones of a free democratic society. It's something that we really think should be heavily protected. And that includes, of course, freedom of expression for the press, for the residents, for public parties, for all of these things. But freedom of expression is not something that exists in a vacuum. It's not an abstraction. It's not that it's absolute as a principle, but it is actually infringed by also other rights and freedoms. So it's you cannot tell lies about other people in public. You could not incite hatred, and hate speech is banned in Sweden. So this coexists with freedom of expression. So the idea here, I think, is that we already have all the laws in place to prevent any repetition of this. So this was not a case of an act of blasphemy. This was not a case of anything like that, but it was very, very clearly a case of trying to incite hatred against Muslims as people, and by denigrating Islam and Muslims publicly. And this is really not allowed by Swedish law, which to me makes it surprising that Paludan, as of yet, has not seriously been tried in court, suspected for having violating
The law.
and for inciting, committing a hate crime.